Steve Adubato here at the Tisch WNET studio. We are honored.
No.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm come on.
That's like
Let's look at this
awesome,
guy.
which has lost its meaning.
I don't say awesome.
You did say awesome.
I
We're gonna
don't
have
say
pizza
it.
next week. That's awesome.
How about if I said the iconic?
Oh, worse.
Jeffrey Lyons, movie critic, Lyons Den radio, author of a fascinating book called What a Time It Was, Lenard Lyons and the Golden Age of New York Nightlife. How you doing?
Very well, thank you. I'm very proud of this book. It's not my achievement, it's my father's writing. It's volume 2. The first one just had no room for the people in this book. Would have been a coffee table book and nobody would read it, so I wrote 2 books out of it.
Tell folks, last time we got a chance to talk was on the radio. I was hosting on AM 970 radio,
right.
and it was a great conversation with you. I said, look, we've got to have a television conversation for the public television audience that you know and love, because I know you love public television.
Right.
Tell folks who your dad was and why he was such an important figure.
My father was a Broadway columnist. He was not a gossip columnist. He didn't write with his eye on the keyhole. From 1934 to 1974, 6 days a week, he wrote for the New York Post, which was a very different paper back then, and he was published all over the world. And while he did have news items, he had anecdotes about people. He said, never used the word celebrity. He said, I'll write about my sister Rosie in Brooklyn if she's newsworthy. And once in a while, my Tante Rosie was newsworthy. Twice a day, he made rounds of restaurants and nightclubs. If he saw another columnist, he would leave. He wanted exclusive stories. And so, Lenny, come here and sit down. And Marlene Dietrich would tell him she's in a new movie. That's a news item. But I'm looking for the anecdotes of things that happened to her. One night, she was in Sardi's late at night with my father. And the next day, somebody told my mother, hey, your husband was in Sardi's with Lindy's. With Marlene Dietrich, my mother said, Lindy's well known for its cheesecake. And he would write his column at 6 o'clock, as did his competitors and contemporaries. Ed Sullivan, Louis Sobel, Hy Gardner, Susie, Charlie Knickerbocker. New York had so many papers back then.
Sure.
They were finished. Their column, he came home. We lived at 81st and Central Park West. Sometimes he'd pitch a couple of quick innings to his sons right across the street when that transverse was just 2 lanes, not 4 lanes. So there's a patch of ground there, and the tree was our third baseman. Then he'd go out again at night, and he'd go to the night places, El Morocco, 21, Toots Shore, all the nightclubs, and then he'd come home at 1 o'clock and update the column that he had written at 6. No faxes, no word process. So for an hour or 2, he's like this, dictating. Then he'd go to bed and get up at noon again and do it again. And Sunday nights, a Western Union messenger would come to the house. And for a year, to take the column back to the paper, for a year, it was a young 16-year-old boy named Edward Albee, which is why, which is why, at the end of his masterpiece, the quarreling couple, Taylor and Burton in the movie version, find out about the death of their imaginary child via Western Union messenger. And I met him once at a function, and I said, is that true? Did you come to her? Yes, and your mother never tipped me. That's how I knew it was true.
Unbelievable. I'm going to give you a name in the book.
Okay.
And you're going to tell me about
hope.
who your dad. Joe Dimaggio.
That's from the first book.
Yeah.
One night, my parents gave a party for Ethel Barrymore, and I woke up, and I was 5, and I saw all the guests, and the only one I recognized or cared anything about was Joseph Paul Dimaggio, even though I'm a Red Sox fan.
Right.
And I walked up to him, I said, Mr. Dimaggio, you're the best guest here. 35 years later at an old-timers game, he must have seen me on TV, called me over, and you imagine? He said, would you still say that? And I said, of course, Joe. In the interim, I got a list of my parents' guests that night. The people I saw cavalierly whizzed by: Ernest Hemingway, Adlai Stevenson, Marlene Dietrich, Edward G. Robinson, Comden and Green, none of whom could hit a curveball.
None of them. Hey,
He never forgot it.
By the way, we should tell people you love, because I'm looking here, because one of them, Yogi Berra, we just had Yogi's granddaughter in here yesterday.
Oh, I know. I met her in the
Lindsay,
park.
she's terrific. We were just talking about Yogi and what a special guy Yogi was, and why we'll never forget him. Yogi in here.
Oh, yeah. Yogi, by the way, gave his wife Carmen a Christmas gift once, and the card read...
Married 65 years.
Right. To Carmen, love Yogi Berra. But anyway, my father was making his rounds one night and stopped at the Copa. This is May 1957.
Oh, not the Copa, not that night.
You know about the fight.
Not that night of the fight.
My father broke that story. And
tell everyone.
He said, well, the Yankees were there.
Is this the Billy Martin, Mickey Mantle?
The Yankees were there to see Sammy Davis Jr. with the first African-American Yankee, number 32 in your program,
Elston Howard.
And some drunk bowler from the Bronx started throwing racial epithets at the 2 African-Americans. Made the mistake of tangling with Hank Bauer, a Guadalcanal veteran, right fielder for the Yankees. about whom it was said he had a face like a clenched fist, wore the buzz haircut, once a Marine, always a Marine. And as the guy was being carried out, my father came in and encountered Yogi. They were about the same height. Yogi said, hey, he tried to keep my father out. He said, hey, Lenny, you've been to Russia here, nice town? And my father said, I see what's happening. You give me the exclusive story before my competitors come, and I'll take you and the Yankees out from the secret passageway from when this place was a speakeasy. And he did. And the next day, his column began. There are now 3 famous battlefields in American history, Gettysburg, Iwo Jima, and the Copacabana. And it became the most infamous off-the-field baseball fight,
right.
and Billy Martin was traded 2 weeks later.
I was just saying, Billy
Bad
Martin,
influence on Mickey Mantle.
That's right. They want to get him away from Mickey Mantle.
And when I met Mickey Mantle one time, when I was working at Channel 11, I mentioned my dad, and his eyes looked up, and he said, your dad was the only journalist who never reported he saw me drunk at Toots Shor's restaurant. I'll never forget him for that. And I said, Mickey, I want to imprint this moment in my life, tell my children. And 2 weeks later, I saw him again. He had no memory of meeting me. That's what it can do to you, you know.
Why do you love baseball?
Well, it's a game with no timeouts. It's an escape from the outer world. You can be tall, short, fat, slow, and still be a Hall of Famer. It helps to be built 6'4" and 220, but, you know, a famous player named Fatty Fothergill played back in the day. Smokey Burgess, who was a fat guy and rolled out of bed and was a 300 hitter. It's a game for everybody, and it's played every day, 18 days in a row. In football, which I love, my dad arranged for me to train with the Giants. I was a field goal kicker. And that's once a week in freezing weather. Basketball is great, but it was invented to keep baseball players in shape. Baseball is there's a line in a movie. It says, baseball is life. And my brother and I wrote 3 baseball trivia books, which we would hope would interest our wives. We failed in that, but we had questions like the heaviest man to steal home plate, the oldest player to get a base hit, the only Hall of Famer buried at sea, the first player traded for himself. And our next book is going to have this question. Who am I? I played for the Yankees. Who am I? I played for the Yankees. I wore a single-digit number, which is now retired. I'm a famous Hall of Famer. I'm a New York baseball name. I'm married, a blonde movie star, and I am not Joe Dimaggio. That's a great question.
Single digit.
Single digit, don't go by the numbers. It's a distracting clue. The answer is, if I may, Leo DeRocher. He was the first to wear number 7. It wasn't retired for anything he did with his bat. And he married Lorraine Day.
Oh, my God, I never would have gotten that. A couple other names. Oh, my God. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, or Eleanor Roosevelt.
My dad had a source in the Roosevelt White House and knew the president and knew almost every president once he was writing, from FDR all the way through. When I finished second, by the way, in my 5th grade class for the run for president, Adlai Stevenson, who had just lost, sent me a telegram saying, it's not so bad, you'll learn to live with it. It's framed.
That happened?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I did lose. Hard to believe.
No. Adlai
Okay.
Stevenson sent you that?
Absolutely. We were his guest in Libertyville, Illinois, and he took me into his room and showed me his father, I think, was vice president, and I began to collect buttons. And anyway, one day, Eleanor Roosevelt, who eschewed Secret Service protection during the war, she'd walk around New York without, which is unthinkable today, sitting on the IRT, as they used to call it, the subway, and a sailor and his wife got on. And about 2 stops in, the sailor said, well, excuse me, anybody tell you look just like Eleanor? And she said, well, I am. And for 10 stops, she started talking about the tripartite summit conference coming, the Marshall Plan, Tuskegee Airmen, the post-war economics. And when the sailor got off at 14th Street, he looked back and said, you know, lady, if anybody says you look like Eleanor Roosevelt, you do a terrific job.
She was...
As far as FDR is concerned, nobody knew in 1940 if he was going to run for a 3rd term. And one night, it's a story my father printed, one night, the great Bundini, whatever his name was, the world's greatest pickpocket, was the White House entertainment. And he picked FDR's wristwatch off him 3 times. Finally, Roosevelt held up his watch and said, 3 times. I kind of like the sound of that. That's how they knew he was going to...
That's how they...
It's in the book.
Joan Rivers. Only because she's a New York icon.
Yes, Joan Rivers. Phi Beta Kappa, by the way.
No.
Joan Malinsky from Barnard. She used to say to apologize for the frizziness of her hair because she said Jackie Onassis and she used the same hairstylist. And when Jackie Onassis would walk in, her hairstylist would drop what he was doing to her hair and say, do the best of it, make the best of it, and would walk over and take care.
Only because I'm fascinated by the history of organized crime. I got to do this.
Lucky Luciano.
How'd you know? Charlie...
Sure. My father went to Naples with my older brother. And he didn't go to see Luciano. Again, he knew newsworthy people. Phone call.
That's where he was from.
He gets a phone call. Well, he was deported there. Didn't speak Italian.
That's right.
Left there as a child. And the phone rings. Lenny, Charlie Lucky, take any cab and say Casa Luciano. My father got in the 5th
Go to
cab.
Casa Luciano.
Got in the 5th cab to make sure it wasn't a plant. Sure enough, took him to Luciano's. And I have a photograph of them meeting, and it's taken from a distance, and it's kind of a wavy line. And I showed it to Christian Slater, who played him in a movie, and now in Boardwalk Empire, I told the story to Vincent Piazza, who played Luciano. And I realized it was such a foggy photograph because it was a surveillance photograph. And my brother, not knowing what a terrible man Luciano was, said to him, do you have a St. Louis Cardinals score? Because my brother was a Cardinal fan. This is 1953. There's no internet and no smartphones. And Luciano says, nah, I play the horses. By the time they got back to the hotel, he had the score. Now, when he was in prison, the Archdiocese of New York, I think it must have been, sent the prison a lot of money to pay for renovations. Luciano heard about this, and he went to the prison chaplain and said, I'll tell you what you do. You bet on 3 horses I pick tomorrow. They're all long shots, and you'll make much more money for this place. Well, of course, the priest ignored him. All 3 horses came in winners, of course. Otherwise, there's no story. My father printed it's history. It was a required reading at NYU for a professor. And Carl Sandburg, America's greatest Lincoln scholar, said if my father had been writing his column during Lincoln's time, we'd really have a record of what went on in New York. Speaking of Carl Sandburg, my father walked into to the Store Club. Sherman Billings.
The Store Club.
Yes, not known to be a voracious reader. My father walked in making his rounds with Carl Sandburg, the greatest Lincoln scholar of them all. And Billings said, what does this guy do? My father said, well, he writes great books. And he said, tell him to mention the Store Club in one of his books. Another night, my father was in Toots Shor's restaurant, and he had an elderly Englishman on his arm. And the moment he heard the English accent, Toots, who knew only about sports, tuned out. Just then, he said, how you doing, bub? Just then, Mel Ott walked in, Hall of Famer.
The great Mel Ott.
Right. Toots Shor turned to the Englishman, excuse me, bub, somebody important walked in, and left my father with his friend, Sir Alexander Fleming, the discoverer of penicillin, because somebody important walked in.
Mel Ott. Do you ever ask yourself how many stories you have?
Well, my dad wrote about 100,000 people, 100,000 different names. It was 12,478 columns. And this is the second book. The first one's called Stories My Father Told Me.
And this one is called What a Time It Was. And the years again?
1934 to 1974. One last quick story. The day after Pearl Harbor, Georgie Jessel, 53, was married to a 16-year-old actress, Lois Andrews. He said to her, I have neckties older than you. She said, Georgie, the Japanese have invaded Manila. My father's there. Do something. He said, at my age, all I can do is cancel our tickets to Madame Butterfly.
Jeffrey Lyons. He is iconic, and these books are powerful. What a time it was. It's been a great time having you here.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate
Go enjoy the book, too. Thank you.
Good stuff. Stay with us. We'll be right back right after this.
One-on-One with Steve Adubato has been a production of the Caucus Educational Corporation, celebrating over 25 years of broadcast excellence. This special edition of One-on-One with Steve Adubato is brought to you from the Tisch WNET studios at Lincoln Center. Funding has been provided by Hackensack University Health Network, Delta Dental of New Jersey, the Northward Center, Josh S. Weston, the Russell Berry Foundation, Investors Bank, and by NJM. Transportation provided by Airbrook Limousine, serving the metropolitan New York, New Jersey area.